EA Sports makes us wonder, is Memorial Stadium still a difficult place to play? We discuss next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good morning, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
All right, welcome in. Hello, happy Wednesday, everyone. I am Mitch Sherman, Connor Happer. You are with me. We knew this was going to happen in advance of the July release of the EA College Sports Football 25, but on Tuesday, the company began to release some of the metrics that will shape the way that this game impacts the millions of fans who plan to play it this fall. Are you one of them, Connor? Are you a big EA guy?
I most certainly am. Yes, I very patiently await its release in a couple weeks.
Okay. All right. Well, cool. Yeah, you're gonna have a fun second half of July then. I think everybody's going to be a lot of people that I work with are definitely very excited about this. The Athletic is going to have lots of content about the EA Sports College Football 25. I'm kind of lukewarm. I'm of the age where, like, when this stuff started coming out and getting to be really big, I was like, had young kids, and I don't know, but I'm interested for sure in these metrics, these lists that EA Sports is putting out. And the one that we got first was the most difficult places to play. What will be the most difficult place to play in the new game? And they released the top 25. And guess who is not on that top 25? I think you know.
Yeah, I think it's Nebraska. And it's not I'm not particularly surprised by that. Now, when you pour through the list and you find that Boise State is on there and Michigan State is on there, you're like, well, I don't know. I'm not so sure about this, but like we do these lists like this every summer, and it's like who has the best home field advantage, or who has the best coach, or whatever it might be. And so much of it is just based on what you do, like basically your record, how many games you win, and in this case, how many games you win at home. And so there's obviously, like, you have to try and separate that with Nebraska as much as you can. And the more you do separate the home field environment from the actual winning and the losing, I think the better the home field environment gets. But Nebraska just hasn't had the results. Like, they've been bad at home, they've been bad on the road, they've been bad pretty much everywhere. So it's not necessarily a surprise. But with that being said, it's a good opportunity to, like, evaluate, all right, how does Nebraska do compared to some other schools? I mean, you've been to a lot of them around the conference and around the country. I've seen, I have a pretty good idea of how Nebraska does it, and I've seen a lot of others around the conference and around the country as well. So, we could put that in perspective a little bit here today, but it's an interesting topic to dive into, given we've talked about Memorial Stadium a lot over the last few weeks of this podcast.
Yeah, right. I think it opens up a conversation. And I mean, the lists come out in the summer and they allow us to talk about things that we wouldn't necessarily talk about when there's football going on. And this is one of those times, and we're going to get some more of these as the date July 19th gets closer when this game is released. So I'm sure we'll talk about this kind of stuff again, but I think this one, it leads into like a real world conversation. And we're going to spend a good chunk of this podcast talking about some of this stuff. And, I am of the belief, first of all, that they messed up on this. I do think that Memorial Stadium in Lincoln is one of the 25 most difficult stadiums to walk into if you're a visitor. And I would challenge anyone who comes on September 7th to argue otherwise. Now, Is it every afternoon in October and November? No. There are times where you go to Memorial Stadium and it doesn't feel like that difficult of a venue. And that is in large part because of the struggles that Nebraska football has had. And even while the fans continue to come and continue to sell out the stadium, they don't always make it the toughest place to play. Or I should say, the team doesn't always make it the toughest place to play. regarding the list, if you're going to make it about the team that occupies the stadium, then Alabama or Georgia or Ohio State should be number one, and instead you have Texas A&M.
It's weird.
And the Aggies have done their share of losing also in the last few years. So I'm not sure how to how to come to grips with Texas A&M being number one on the list, and then another program that struggled a lot, Nebraska, not being on the list at all.
It's really weird. I'm not sure what to like, and that's a hard thing to do too. And like this one, the game itself, EA Sports will come out with its rankings and offense, defense rankings, and like that'll actually be like this. It's pretty broad and generic of like from reading what they put out, it was one of those things where, it was like a lot of these stadiums are going to have these kind of effects on the game. And there's not necessarily a definitive 1 through 25, but they released the list. And so, that's our talking point over the.
We know that Kyle Field shakes and it gets pretty wild there, but Memorial Stadium can get pretty wild. And, I would ask Connor, especially with your expertise in some of this game management stuff. I know you obviously do work for Nebraska and on the basketball side, Creighton, Storm Chasers. What should Nebraska be doing? Away from the, hey, they should have a better third down defense. They should win games. Like they should rally in the fourth quarter when the fans are behind them. What do you think Nebraska can be doing different in the off-field area to make Memorial Stadium more intimidating for opponents?
So just to be clear here, the winning part is absolutely key, because the more you win, the more you have big games, and the more you have big games, the more you have these like memorable crowd moments. And theoretically, Nebraska will have one at the beginning of September. But if you go beyond that, there's like I have always viewed it as, and I like you said, Mitch, I work with all those people, whether it's in the basketball sphere or just being around them in football, and I get the opportunity to like bounce my ideas off of them and have my input how things should go. But I do think they're working with a lot in that there's a lot going on. You're trying to balance like 700 different things. You have this tradition that is really strong, and it's a tunnel walk, and we'll talk about the tunnel walk here in just a second. But like you have these traditional parts and things that fans have come to expect at every football game since 1960 whatever. That's a big piece that kind of lords over this entire conversation. And then you have Nebraska wants to make money off of its game presentation, and they have sponsorships to sell, and they have a lot of people that they want to feature. They have a lot of their teams that they want to feature. Football is such a big sport to feature the rest of the athletic department as well. And so you often find yourself at these games, kind of bouncing from side to side, and there's 7 different screens going on in the football stadium, and like there was an article that came out during basketball season about this type of thing at like Penn State, and there's t-shirt cannons, and there's Herbie on the screen who's yelling at you, or there's the big gopher at Minnesota that's on the screen, kind of looking at you like that. I just think there's been a lot going on at these things. If you were to kind of simplify it and maybe pare it down a little bit, it would get a little bit easier to do. Now, with that being said, like, if it's a big third down, it's a big third down, and the crowd is loud for that. Like, it's undeniably loud. So, there's only so much I think that the game operations side has to do with it, but it definitely has an effect on how people react to things for sure.
Yeah, there's a balance for sure in finding the way to serve tradition, but also be modern and engage fans, young fans, not so young fans. How do you pump up the players specifically? Is that something that game operations in any way should be involved with? And I do want to talk about the tunnel walk, but I want to save that for the second segment, because we're running toward the end of this first segment, and I think it's a really interesting discussion. It's not like the end all be all. I introduced this on on social media yesterday, and some people came at me with like, well, do you really think that's more important than the team winning? And no, I don't. I don't think it's more important than the team winning, but I think it's like the first dose that you get of the game experience. So there's some importance there, and there's been some time in Memorial Stadium's history where it was a really impactful event. But again, I want to get to that in the second segment.
And I also think, this is an important time too, because we've done a lot of discussing over the last several weeks, months, and almost, I guess, years now. What's Memorial Stadium going to look like going forward? In order to define that, in order to, have a clear picture of what instead of it being, 7 different things and trying to serve all these different purposes and causes, you kind of have to decide what you want to be. So like, is Nebraska going to be a place that caters, to its the music that's played? Is it loud? Is it, upbeat and stuff like that? Or is it still AC/DC, or is it still stand up and shout? Or, how much amenities are they going to have for fans? And can you serve all of those people of different, economic standings at the same time? Like, you kind of have to define that. And so I've always thought that Nebraska has been a place that's been about like the football first. And I think that continues on into the future, but obviously the fans kind of are changing as well. So I think there's a lot to the question, honestly, that we can continue on with.
I do think they've done a really nice job with some of the stuff, like the pre-fourth quarter light show that was added a couple of years ago. And it's an indication that Nebraska has the ability to be really innovative with the stuff that the experience that they want to create at Memorial Stadium. So there's more they can do, but you don't want to go too far, like you said, because some of it is just about good old fashioned, third down stops. So that will make Memorial Stadium the most difficult place to be that it can if the team is performing. All right, so we're going to continue this discussion after the break and talk a little bit about the tunnel walk. Please subscribe and follow us on Twitter, X, at Locked On NEB. You can email us at lockedonneb@gmail.com. Let us know if you want to be a sponsor of the show. That would be great to pick up some local support before we get going in football season. We'd love to have a conversation with you about that. Also, don't forget to subscribe and download Apple Podcasts, Spotify, everywhere you get your podcasts. Watch us on YouTube. When we come back, as we said, is the Nebraska tunnel walk outdated? All right, Mitch Sherman here for Game Time. If you've listened to our podcast, even one episode, that we enjoy Major League Baseball at this time of year. When I go to a game, I know, and I've done this a couple times this year, that Game Time will make that experience much easier. It is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. It makes getting tickets easier and faster because prices on the Game Time app go down the closer you get to first pitch. Now, maybe not if it's Game 7 of the World Series, but if you're going to Kansas City or St. Louis or Minneapolis on a weekend and you're unsure, you check the prices. Most likely, as you get closer to that first pitch, you're going to see the best deals pop up. So wherever you want to go this summer, to a Major League Baseball game, to a concert, maybe you're looking at a college football game this fall. It's a hot ticket. You can find it there on Game Time. I love that you can see flash deals. You can look at views from your seat. You can customize your own spot in the stadium, all on the app. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to receive $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
All right, welcome back. Yesterday on Twitter, Mitch, you tweeted, and I quote, "Fix the tunnel walk, Nebraska." Wow. And not surprisingly, they got many, many responses, some of which were constructive and some of which were not. What do you mean by fix the tunnel walk?
Yeah. Well, I think the song is stale and old and doesn't work with the new entrance from the locker room, the new locker room that Nebraska opened last season at the Osborne Legacy Complex. It's a longer walk. I think the players don't get it. They don't remember the 90s, and they don't remember Jason Peter going crazy, walking down the tunnel, listening to that music. Like, they're not in touch with the 1990s Chicago Bulls culture that was so
Yep.
cool in that time, and it's where the music spawned from. Obviously, there's a way to do this and make this an intimidating experience, to make it something not, and it doesn't even have to be intimidation, because sometimes the opponent will stay in the locker room because they'll come out on the field after Nebraska. But if they are out there, I do remember a day when opponents would look up at the scoreboard in awe, and they'd hear that music, and it was like they were down 14 points before the ball was snapped. I'm not asking Nebraska to recreate that. I'm asking them to analyze what they're doing with the tunnel walk, because it seems like the one part of the game experience that hasn't been overhauled, and it's been almost untouchable, because this is a connection somehow to a championship era. But things are different. Nebraska's been in 2 locker rooms and moved out of them since this thing was introduced. So let's give it a makeover. Like, make it at least time up, so that when the players reach the field, like, the song is at its excitement, its peak of excitement. It's not right now. They have to kind of restart the thing and get it going. And I just think the music too. Like, there's got to be something better out there now than the Alan Parsons Project's Sirius.
We've definitely seen like really long tunnel walks and really short tunnel walks for Nebraska. Like, I can recall everybody's starting to get kind of bored just clapping along to the Alan Parsons Project.
Right.
It's
one response. Yeah. Well, let me say this really quick, because I think this can lead into the next part that we talk about. One response I received on Twitter yesterday from a fan who says the tunnel walk is the one tradition we've got that can compete with traditions people talk about around the nation. Whatever we would replace it with would be a downgrade. Why do you think that? Why do you think whatever you replace it with would be a downgrade? Is it because the football program has downgraded itself over the years? Nebraska has an incredible multimedia department, digital media, that has done all kinds of video production, with music, without music, with voiceovers, that could be fantastic for this part of the game experience. And I it's like this defeatist's opinion that, like, we can't change it because it's probably going to be worse. I don't get that.
It would be great to get the, especially for like a night game. Now, it's not very often, if at all, where Nebraska actually walks out of the tunnel at nighttime, but you get the lights going in there, and they do the thing for the third quarter, especially for those night games, which has been fun. I guess it's really delicate, like I said, because it's Nebraska hasn't necessarily shown, if they have tried to revamp traditions, and a lot of the traditions that we knew even 20 years ago are completely gone now, or have changed, or whatever it might be, like the balloons and stuff like that. Like, these things have changed over the years, and then we just accept them, and it happens. So eventually we'd get used to it, but at first, I think it would be difficult to accept anything else but the Alan Parsons Project for people watching Nebraska.
People of a certain age. Yes,
it really does. And I also think you run the risk of, I don't necessarily want them to come out to a different song every game either. I think we had this discussion every summer of like, what should the song be if they were to change the tunnel walk? What would the song be? And the problem is, you got to pick one. And it's hard. Like, what is the right song that fits this and that makes sense, and that you could build a kind of production around as well. Well, I agree that the tunnel walk as it stands right now is a little stale. I might fall into that same defeatist mentality, Mitch. Like, I might sit here and tell you, I wonder what Nebraska could come up with to make it better, and something that people would embrace right away. And that I think is the difficult part. After a year of, maybe you just have to force it down people's throats for a year. And that's kind of the way it goes. I remember they changed the tunnel walk song one time. And it was the spring game, Frost's first spring game, right after all the floods. He changed the tunnel walk song, and they came out to the rock version of Come Together. And it was good, and people I think liked it, but were maybe mildly confused. They were like, "What do I do? I don't have a song to clap along with here," and so it's complicated because there's a lot of different things going on.
I like that song, and
That's good.
I was doing it in a spring game is one thing, and they did have a huge crowd for that spring game, Frost's first year. That was the one where it sold out in like 48 hours, which is
Mm-hmm.
crazy. But you still don't have the environment at a spring game, even that one, that you would for a season opener, or even if you want to debut it on for the Colorado game. Like maybe you do the normal tunnel walk, the first game of the year, and then it's like, hey, look, we got something in store on September 7th. But you probably want to start at the beginning of the year. Um, I I just believe that they could really come up with something good. Um, I know there are a lot of fans out there, and I've had this conversation not just this week, but other times too, where I've brought this up because I've thought the tunnel walk had run its course going back a few years now, and I'm surprised at the number of people who disagree, and maybe you're in that camp, who just think that we should stick with it because that's that's what was played in the stadium when I grew up coming to games, and yeah, they're also going to put a giant new scoreboard
Mm-hmm.
above the south end zone, and when they put the big north one up, or even the ones in the corners, they were cutting edge and innovative, and they were better than what people were doing in college football. And you find a way to do it better. I mean, they found a way to do the weight room better. You found a way to do all different aspects of your program better. And I think this is just another area where they can if they could just get past that, hey, we've done it this way for a long time and we don't want to kick that tradition to the curb. I think there's a way, and I'm just thinking of this off the top of my head as we have this conversation. I think there's a way to have new music and a new entrance that's exciting and builds. And maybe it's not even the entire tunnel, although I do think you like to see them coming out of the locker room. That incorporates a little bit of the old music. Maybe you
Sure.
keep it alive in some way by mixing it in, but the overall song and presentation is up to date and modern and something that excites the fans and players more than it does right now.
I've talked to people who have worked on the marketing side and in the game operations department over the last several years who have been other places or then have gone on to other places. And one of the sentiments that I've heard a couple of times is that Nebraska is a difficult place to do this job because it is so, it's easy, but it's difficult, but it's so beholden to its tradition. And it really leans into that piece of it, where if you go to, I don't know, Tulsa or something like that, you can kind of create your own things and you could design it however you'd like to do it. I think Nebraska basketball is kind of similar in that way as well. You could build it out however you want, in whatever image you want to build it out in. At Nebraska football, like it's the puzzle is kind of halfway put together already before you start to do that. And maybe what you're saying, Mitch, is it doesn't have to be, and you can kind
Right.
of, you can change things that way, but it would be difficult for people to accept. I don't like, you could obviously they could come up with something better. And so I'm like not vehemently against it. But I there is something that about the tradition that I really, really like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, keep some of the tradition alive, but update the whole process. I mean, go check
Yeah.
out Nebraska volleyball. They've got lots of tradition, and they have a more modern, up to date way to introduce the team. That's really exciting, and it's better than what they do at Memorial Stadium. So, when we come back after the break, we're going to talk about one guy who no longer has to worry about things at Memorial Stadium, although it was somewhat recently on his plate. So, that's next. But first, if you are watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you've got to turn down the volume because people are shouting, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you to bring you the biggest stories without all the yelling. Locked On Sports Today delivers can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Okay, as I said before the break there, One person in the college athletics world who was very attuned to Memorial Stadium somewhat recently, but no longer has to worry about it, is Trev Alberts. So let's check in with Trev, and we wonder how he's doing right now in this very moment. People saw him on Monday night in Omaha at Charles Schwab Field. His Aggies, Tech of Texas A&M, were playing for a national championship. All was good. They lost, but what a great season. You made it to the big stage. We're within one victory of a national championship. And then on Tuesday, boom, Coach Jim Schlossnagle, the baseball coach, is headed to Texas, the enemy program within the states, the Longhorns obviously had this thing locked down under Trev's nose long before Monday and the college baseball finale, or there's no way he's ready to go on Tuesday afternoon. And he's taking his entire staff with him. This is brutal for Trev to be in this moment, less than 4 months into his tenure in College Station. And he's now getting a taste of the harsh side of being an AD. Now, I mean, look, he knew that this was a possibility, this kind of stuff. It can be rough to be an AD in the SEC. But I don't know that he expected it to happen as fast as it has.
No, I don't think so. It was reported that this was, going to happen, or felt like it was going to happen several weeks ago during the regular season. Yeah. I mean, that's shocking stuff. And so, first of all, I'll say this. How is this Trev's fault? It doesn't really seem like it's Trev's fault. Now, it is Trev's problem. So for the Texas A&M people who are like, yeah, we got to get rid of this guy, I don't think he was given much of an opportunity, to go back to Schloss and say, hey, what are they offering you? Let's match it. What can we do to keep you? I think he was pretty much gone. So this is not Trev's problem, or this is not Trev's fault, but it is his problem. Now he's got to deal with it, and it'll cause this kind of ripple effect, because what I expect A&M to do is go hire a really good sitting coach from somewhere. I was thinking about it last night. So Trev has hired one baseball coach, and that would be Evan Porter at Omaha.
Oh,
and
wow.
So I don't know. I don't know. He doesn't have a lot of experience in wading into these waters.
Welcome to College Station, Evan Porter. No,
Will Bolt. I also don't think.
Yeah, don't worry about Will Bolt. Will Bolt, although he did coach at Texas A&M under Rob Childress, they're gonna aim big. And no offense to Will and what he's done at Nebraska, but they're looking for someone who's probably won a national championship or competed for a national championship, been to the College World Series. Like, the SEC is a different world. Like, I think we mentioned on the show already that Ohio State went and hired the Campbell coach. Well, Texas hired the Texas A&M coach, who was playing for the national championship the night before it made the hire. So
a little different.
Yeah. And to follow up on your part of your comment about how this isn't really Trev's fault, there's nothing he could do. Schlossnagle and Chris Delcani, the AD at Texas, are best friends. And it goes back to their many years that they spent together in Fort Worth at TCU. And when it didn't actually go all that far south at Texas, but when there was an opportunity for Delcani to fire his coach and reunite with Schloss, he was going to jump at that. Mm-hmm. Interesting that Texas did end its season in College Station at the regional in June. So presumably Schloss and Delcani knew what was up in that moment, and that they were going to be coming together, and had to create just some conflicting, strange feelings that very few people knew about were happening during that regional.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and there's some stuff with like I said, not Trev's fault. There's some stuff with Schloss where I think there's a large pull for him, obviously, to want to be with Delcani, but also to want to be in a bigger city and and to just have more access to resources, make more money, obviously, and stuff like that as well. Yeah. I don't think anything would have really kept him at Texas A&M. And so I am super intrigued to see what Trev's reaction to all this. Obviously, he put out a statement yesterday. Texas A&M fans just kept getting mad at him. There's nothing he could do about that at this point. Like, it's just this, whatever he says is not going to be probably good for him at this moment. But I wonder who's getting a call today. Like, I wonder where, because it's a great job, and they're throwing $80 million into their baseball facility as we speak. And they have great NIL, and they have great fan support, and they have very, very good players. Now they have no staff and no coach. And
Crazy.
So where do you kind of go from here?
Yeah. So in the A&M statement, he said, we will find a great leader and excellent coach to head up this proud Aggie baseball program. Seems very benign. Like, that is what you would say, what any athletic director would say in the moment of losing your coach. And in response, on Twitter Tuesday night, Texas A&M fan, the spirit of Coriat, hey Trev Alberts, I think I speak for so many Aggies when I say this about that last statement. You effing better. And it was uncensored. Like, they're mad, and they just played for the national championship. So he's in the cauldron at this moment. And I don't know if you're a Nebraska fan at this point, how you should feel about that. Nebraska's going to have its moments too, where the heat is on in the coming months and years. So be careful what you wish for when it comes to Trev Alberts. But he's going to have to earn his big paycheck here over the next couple of weeks in College Station.
All right, Mitch, plenty more coming up later in the week. We'll be back with you on Friday morning. Have another pod as we'll be rounding out June at that point. So we're headed into the
turning the corner
of the summer. Yeah, we're turning the page. Locked On, before we go, has launched the first ever National Sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app.